Hi, everyone. We hope you guys are having a wonderful day out there. Thank you so much for joining us today. It is Mr. Tiska with you once again. And once again, I'm joined by Mrs. Kraft. Mrs. Kraft, how are you today?
The world is right today.
Ooh, the world is very much right today. We also have Ms. Hoff with us. Ms. Hoff, how are you?
I'm excellent.
Fantastic. So today we're going to do Chapter 6, Section 2, the Bill of Rights. Now, the big idea for today, the Bill of Rights was added to the Constitution to define clearly the rights and freedoms of citizens.
And the main ideas that we're going to talk about are the First Amendment guarantees basic freedoms to individuals. Other amendments focus on protecting citizens from certain abuses. The rights of the accused are an important part of the Bill of Rights, and the Bill of Rights states that citizens are protected by the Bill of Rights. Main idea 1. The First Amendment guarantees basic freedoms to individuals. So James Madison promised that a Bill of Rights would be added to the Constitution, something to protect the rights of the individuals. States ratified these 10 amendments, and they called them the Bill of Rights. Protection of individual liberties is really important to democracy because of something called majority rule. And this is the idea that the greatest number of people in a society can make the policies for everyone. So the largest number of people who are voting towards one thing, that's what's going to happen. The First Amendment, which we're going to talk about, protects the freedoms of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, and right to petition. So, First Amendment, you have freedom of religion. This means that the government cannot support or interfere with the practice of religion. They cannot support one religion over another or establish an official religion. So you couldn't have the Church of the United States. Freedom of speech and freedom of the press. So Americans have the right to express their own ideas, hear the ideas of others, and that's what we get from freedom of speech as well as freedom of the press, like newspapers and things like that. Freedom of assembly. Americans have the freedom of assembly or holding meetings, so they can get together, gather together, hold meetings, town meetings, all of that. And right to petition. So Americans have the right to petition or make requests of the government. This allows Americans to show if they have a dissatisfaction or they're unhappy with laws, to get them to change the laws or suggest new laws. Main idea 2. Other amendments focus on protecting citizens from certain abuses.
So one of the most controversial amendments that we have is the Second Amendment, which basically says in the Constitution that the states have the right to maintain militias. Now, a lot of people interpret that meaning as people have the right to own a weapon. Some people also look at it and say, well, wait a minute, it's talking about militias. We no longer have militias today. Just so we're clear, militias are the groups of men who would defend the colonies. So some people say, wait a minute, that doesn't mean that we have the right to own a weapon. But generally, it is understood that that's what it means. Now, depending on what state you live in, some things may be required, such as having a license, not being able to conceal a weapon. That means you have to show a weapon if you are carrying one. So it really depends on state by state. But generally speaking, the Second Amendment means the right to bear arms or own a weapon.
Now, the Third Amendment is what prevents the military from having to live in your houses. And you'll notice that as we talk more and more about the amendments, a lot of it has to do with what happened when the king was in charge. So if you think back to the Quartering Act, which was the punishment for the Boston Tea Party, the king said we were forced to have soldiers live among us. So they're actually going to put down the rules that will prevent that from happening again. Now, clearly, the Third Amendment is not one that's very relevant to today, because you wouldn't have soldiers living in your house if we were here now.
And then the Fourth Amendment protects Americans from unreasonable search and seizure. Now, when we say seizure, we mean the taking of property. It basically means that authorities such as police must get a search warrant to search or take your property. But that last line that you see there, except in emergency situations, That's really important. Now, the example that I normally use is if a police officer's on patrol in a neighborhood and they hear a gunshot coming from a house, the police officer can enter that house because they have a reasonable suspicion or what's called probable cause to believe that a crime has been committed or will be committed in the very near future. So police don't always need a search warrant. Now, a search warrant is written permission from a judge to either search or take someone's property, and they usually are very specific, and the police do have to follow them pretty much word for word.
And a lot of times when the police write up a search warrant, if they're looking for a rifle, they can only look in places that would be big enough to hold a rifle. So you couldn't look in a jewelry box for a rifle. So when they make up the warrants, they say that they're looking for the rifle and ammunition and anything that might be connected to a rifle, which gives them a lot more ability to check out other places. And again, that ties into writs of assistance where the British were just coming on ships and searching, and again, just taking people's property.
Main idea 3, the rights of the accused are an important part of the Bill of Rights. And
Okay,
the
so
5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th Amendments provide guidelines for protecting the rights of accused. So the 5th Amendment.
now the Fifth Amendment has a whole bunch of moving parts. It's way more than just one fact, like we've said so far before this. So according to the Fifth Amendment, you cannot be punished without due process of law. So due process is like you're innocent, you're presumed innocent until proven guilty. So the whole idea of having a trial and being able to defend yourself is all part of due process. And the word that you see in bold there, indict, I know everybody wants to pronounce it indict, but it's not. It is pronounced indict. So it says that you can't just say, oh, Mr. Chizky, you're guilty without having proof of this. And so it forces them to not just lay rare accusations.
Right. It's pretty much the steps that the government has to take before they can throw you in prison. They can't just say, like Mrs. Kraft said, hey, you're guilty, we're just going to throw you in prison for 20 years. No, there's a bunch of steps that they must take in order to get to that.
Now, the other part of it, another part of this is that you don't have to testify against yourself. So if you were at the scene of a crime, you don't have to then say, yeah, I was there. So I don't know if you've ever heard people say, I plead the Fifth. That's what this is referring to. It's actually, they're pleading the Fifth Amendment, which says I don't have to testify against myself. And as an aside, a spouse does not have to testify against their spouse either as part of this.
And by the way, as another aside, don't use that against your parents, or when we do go back to school, don't use it against Mr. Jagu or Mr. Gluhusky or Miss Rego, because it only worked in a court of law, kids.
Yeah, but it'd be good if it could, right? Now, the next part that you see here, also in bold print, is double jeopardy. Now, double jeopardy, a lot of kids ask tons of questions about this. Double jeopardy means that you can't be tried again for the same crime. But that doesn't mean that if you get caught stealing once, that you can't be tried again for stealing a second time. It just means that if you've already had a court trial for an offense on this day at this place, that you can't be tried again for that. And there was this excellent movie, Mr. Chizky, I don't know if you ever saw it. It was actually a movie called Double Jeopardy.
Is that the movie with Ashley Judd and Tommy Lee Jones?
I saw it.
Yes, it was so good. So,
I've never seen it.
So in the movie, the husband fakes his own death and he frames the wife for it. So she goes, yeah, sorry about this. So she goes to court. She's found guilty of killing him. Now she serves her time and there's never a body found. So I don't remember what happened that she gets out of jail, but she gets out of jail and realizes that he's alive. And so then she encounters him, and I guess I can't. Can I give away the ending? Are they really going to watch it?
Okay. Spoiler alert in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
She kills him. And he's like, you're not going to kill me. And she's like, I've already served my time for that. Hello, Double Jeopardy, which was the name of the movie. And so that's it. She can't be tried again for killing him.
And essentially, guys, what this is made for is this is made to make sure that the courts are fair. Like, I'll give you an example. Let's say Miss Hoff is put on trial for something, and I'm the judge, and I don't like Miss Hoff, and she's found not guilty, and I say, well, wait a minute, I don't like that. We're going to put her on trial again. So it prevents situations like that.
Mm-hmm.
Gee, thanks.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
So that's okay. So again, due process of law means that you can get through everything. And so here you have an exception to due process where you can't have property taken against you, and that's called eminent domain. So that means that your property can be taken if it is for the good of the public. So I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember, but on the corner of Bordentown and Ernstton Road, there used to be a gas station there. And then they decided to widen Ernstton Road and make it a 3-lane coming towards Washington. I hope you understand what I'm saying. So on that corner, they had to sell that gas station as part of eminent domain in order to make the road bigger. And they didn't have any choice about it. It was what it was.
Yeah, just one quick thing on eminent domain. So a lot of students freak out when I talk about that. They say, oh my God, is the government going to take my property? Well, first of all, the government has to prove that it's for the public good. They can't just say, oh, I like your house, so I'm going to take your house. And also, they have to give you fair market value for whatever they take. Now, the one thing about that is the government is actually the one that decides what the fair value is. You don't decide what the fair value is. So that's how it works. So eminent domain is usually only used for the public good.
Rights guaranteed by the 6th, 7th, and 8th Amendments.
So the 6th Amendment gives you the right to a speedy and public trial by jury. Now, when we say speedy, we don't mean that your trial will be over in, an hour or something like that. What it means is your trial has to take place in a reasonable amount of time after you are arrested. They can't just say, well, we're going to arrest you, but we won't put you on trial for 10 years. And also, your trial has to be in the public. That's, again, to make sure that it's fair. You guys can actually, if you are interested, if you want to grow up to be a police officer or a lawyer or something like that, you can actually go and watch cases in court. You can do that. And a lot of law students will do that to study. You also have the right to know what charges are being used against you. You have the right to hear witnesses. You have the right to call witnesses to your defense. So if there's somebody out there that can prove that you didn't do the crime, you have the right to call them and have them speak on your behalf. You have the right to an attorney. So all of that. And again, this is to make sure that everything is done fairly.
And you know what? There's a law called Miranda law, which Mr. Chiska, you got all excited. Like, oh, I want to talk about that.
Well, I don't know if because it's been a few years, but the example that I always use when we talk about the Miranda law is, I don't know how many of you have ever seen the movie 21 Jump Street. The latest one came out years ago with Channing Tatum. But anyway, there's a scene in the beginning of that movie. Channing Tatum's a cop, and they arrest someone that they believe is dealing drugs. But what happens is they don't read him his Miranda rights. And because they don't read him the Miranda rights, the criminal goes free. And so the Miranda rights are the rights that a cop must read you when you are under arrest. So you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. And that's
the right to an attorney.
You have the right to an attorney. If you can't afford one will be provided for you by the state. If a police officer does not read you those Miranda rights, you can go free. And that's why if you talk to police officers, a lot of them will actually just have it on a little card, and all they have to do is read it. That's all they have to do. They just have to read it so that you can hear it. That's it.
Yeah. And that came from this law, right? Because people said, I didn't know I had a right to an attorney. I didn't know I didn't have to say anything.
Actually, the basis for it is found here, but it came from a Supreme Court case. I believe it was Miranda v. Arizona. And that actually, the Supreme Court ruled that police officers must read those rights because not everybody knows these rights. A lot of adults don't know what rights they have under the Constitution. That's why this is so important that you guys are learning it, because, you never know if you may need them someday or someone that you know may need them. So always be prepared.
Absolutely. Now, the seventh amendment says that you have a right to a trial by jury in civil cases. And so instead of just a judge sitting in front, you have what they call a jury of your peers. So they take people from the community and they serve as your jury, and they're the ones that decide your guilt or innocence. So a lot of times people will complain, oh, I got jury duty. I hate going to jury duty. Well, if you're an accused person or if you're being sued, wouldn't you want people to be there to listen to your case? So I think jury duty is a huge part of your citizenship and what's unique in America.
And just to back up, that is also guaranteed to you in the Sixth Amendment, the trial by jury. Meaning, like, the 12 to decide whether you're guilty or not guilty. All 12 to agree. If just one is not sure, then what we call a hung jury, and you can go free because of that. Now, the Eighth Amendment.
Wait, can I just jump in one quick second?
Good.
The Seventh Amendment, when you read it in your textbook, it kind of looks a little outdated because it says that you have this right when you're suing for any amount of $20 or more, which back then apparently was a lot more than $20 is now. But they've never changed that. They've never upped the ante. And I just want to say one more thing. A civil case is different than a criminal case. A criminal case involves jail time or some kind of a punishment like that. A civil case generally involves a monetary outcome. So I don't know if any of you guys even ever heard of O.J. Simpson, but O.J. Simpson was accused in a criminal case of killing his wife and another person, and he was found innocent. So he did not go to jail for that. But then his wife's family sued him in a civil case, and they won damages, and he had to pay them. So they're different between the two.
Now, the Eighth Amendment allows for bail, and bail is the amount of money that you pay to stay out of jail while you are awaiting your trial. Now, bail must be reasonable. What that means is if I commit, a smaller crime, like let's say I, shoplift or I steal something small or something like that, they just can't set my bail at $10 million. It has to be reasonable. Now, bail can be denied to you if you're what's considered to be like a flight risk. If they think that you're not going to appear for your trial, if you're going to flee the country or just not appear in general, then the judge can say, you know what, I'm not going to give you bail. You are going to wait in jail until your trial. Or if you are considered a danger to those around you, if the judge determines that, you know what, you committed a violent crime here or you're accused of committing a violent crime and we think that you may do it again, then I'm not going to give you bail. So that can happen. Now, the bigger part of the Eighth Amendment, it protects you against cruel and unusual punishments. What that means is basically the punishment has to fit the crime. A lot of people today consider what's called capital punishment, that's the death penalty, to be cruel and unusual punishment. So that's just an example of something that the Eighth Amendment may protect you against.
And it's funny because back when they wrote this, people felt that being committed to a lifetime of prison was cruel and unusual. And that was not often used as a punishment.
Main idea 4. The rights of states and citizens are protected by the Bill of Rights.
Okay, so the Ninth Amendment actually says that there are other rights in the Constitution that are not listed here. Like, you have the right to go out and buy a pair of shoes. You have the right to get married. You have the right to an education. Like, there's a ton more rights, but there's no way that they could literally list every single right that a person has. So they're just acknowledging in the Ninth Amendment that our rights go beyond what is written here.
And then finally, the 10th Amendment basically says that if there's something in the Constitution that the federal government will not take care of, or that it doesn't say that the states can't do it, the states can do it. So it basically gives the states a lot of power. It basically says, listen, unless the federal government will do it, or unless we say that the states can't do it, the states can do it. Like one example would be like traffic laws or establishing police and fire departments. The states will normally take care of that. Why? Because the federal government doesn't do it, and nowhere in the Constitution does it say that the states can't do it. So that's how the 10th Amendment works.
And that helped to appease the anti-federalists, because they were the ones that were like, oh, the states aren't going to have any rights. It's going to be like the king again. So by having this say, all right, look, if it's not specifically a federal rule, you guys can have it. So it made the anti-federalists happy, happy, joy, joy.
100%. And I believe that's it for us today. Mrs. Kraft, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, thanks very much.
Ms. Hoff, anything?
Nope. Have a great day, everyone.
Have a wonderful day, guys. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.